Hello everyone, welcome back. Previously, we explored the package.json file and listed some important properties you can add. In this video, we will learn more about error handling, the different types of errors, and how to handle them. These errors, we are going to discuss them in the context of Node.js. In this section, we are going to cover the following. First, we are going to look at error handling in Node.js. And next, we are going to talk about using debugger. And lastly, we are going to explore stack traces. Error handling is a crucial aspect of Node.js development. It ensures that applications can gracefully handle unexpected errors and prevent crashes. In Node.js, errors can occur for various reasons, such as programming, system failures, or user input validation issues. Proper error handling helps developers identify, log, and handle errors effectively, improving the reliability and stability of Node.js applications. Now, let's explore some types of errors you may encounter while working with Node.js. First, we have JavaScript errors. JavaScript errors occur due to programming mistakes or unexpected conditions in the code. These errors include syntax, type, references, or even runtime errors, such as dividing by zero or accessing undefined variables. So these kind of errors are basically categorized under JavaScript errors. Now let's take a look at an example. Alright guys, so here we have a simple code editor. You can basically visit play.masteringbackend.com, maybe /JavaScript or any of these languages that you want to try out. Okay, so now that we are here, let's try out a simple JavaScript error. So assuming we want to console log hello world, I'm just going to change this to hello world. Right? So what we can do is, assuming we make a simple mistake by removing this. Okay, so we already start seeing errors on the editor, and these kind of errors are simply called JavaScript errors. Now, if you try to compile this, let's see, we have an error showing syntax errors like this. Okay, so generally they are all called JavaScript errors because this has to do with what? The syntax of the programming language that you are using. And since it's not correct, and that's why we have this error printed. Okay, so you can basically correct this and you will have the result of what you're looking for. All right, so now that we've seen a good example of JavaScript errors, let's take a look at system errors. So system errors occur when a system call fails due to issues such as insufficient permission, or for example, a file is not found, or maybe you try to make a network call and it doesn't work. For example, you're trying to make call to an endpoint that doesn't exist. So these kind of errors can be caught by your Node.js application and handled gracefully, and they are basically generated by the operating system that you are using to run your Node.js application. Okay, so for example, if you're making call to an endpoint and it doesn't exist, or maybe you're trying to access a file in an operating system that is not being created or doesn't exist, these kind of errors are being thrown in Node.js and you need to handle them. So there are different ways that you can handle these errors, and we are going to look into them as we progress in this section. Okay, so the next errors that we have is user-specific errors. So user-specific errors are custom errors developers define to represent specific application conditions. Now, these errors can provide additional context or information about the cause of the error, making it easier to dialog or troubleshoot issues. For example, you can create a class in Node.js and extend the Node.js error class. So what happens is that inside this your new class, you can decide to call it a valid input error. So here you define the constructor and you also define different properties that makes up this error. Okay, so what happens is that anytime you are writing your application's code and you notice that there will be an error, maybe some of the input that was expected is not defined, you can throw this error and inform the front end that invalid input errors occurred. Okay, so as we progress also in this class, I'm going to show you how to create a custom error and how to throw a custom error in your application. So moving on, we have the assertion errors. Now, assertion errors occur when an assertion fails, indicating that an expected condition is not met. So for example, in your Node.js application, as we progress along, we are going to learn how to write unit test and also how to write integration test. So sometimes you might decide to assert that this particular condition is going to be true or is going to be false. So any of those that happens, you might want to throw an error, or an error will be thrown indicating that the assertion failed or the assertion did not fail. So these errors are commonly used in testing frameworks to validate code behaviors during unit tests. So during unit tests, we are going to explore more about assertion tests. All right, so next, let's move on to the playground and let me demonstrate these different errors, showing you how to catch them and also how to handle these different errors. All right, guys, so here we are in our playground. First, let's start by demonstrating the system errors. All right, so I will try to access a file here in this playground. So let's start by requiring fs equals to require. Here I will require fx. Next, I will try to use fx to read a file that doesn't exist. So I will say here, non-existing file .txt. All right, so next thing is to try to get the content. Sorry. First, I will check for the error and then the data. I'll pass this to a function. I'll say if error console log. Let's print out the error. This is one way of handling the errors that might happen in your application. So here, if error, let's say error reading file. All right, and of course, the next thing is to print out the error. So if we have this as an error, we should print out the error. If not, I am just going to say return here so that I don't have to do else. If not, I should print out the content of the file. So here I will say file content and I'll print out data. All right, so this is a very simple program that would work, assuming we have a real Node.js environment, but still I'm going to test it out here. First, we are requiring fs, which is Node.js file system, and we are using that to read a file in our system, and the file does not exist. Of course, we don't have this file anywhere. So let's try to run this and see what the console tells us. All right, so first we have error reading file, which is basically this error that we specified here. And then of course the error type saying that no such file or directory exists. Okay, so this is true because we don't have this file anywhere in our system. Okay, so basically we have handled this error by using the if statement to check for the error and then console logging or displaying a nice message to the user telling the user what has happened. Okay, so we can basically take this out and just show the user error reading file. Okay, but I think it's better you just have that. Assume we don't have these error checks here, and then we go ahead to read the content of the data. Let's see what actually happens. So we click on run. So here we have file content undefined. So meaning that the file content here is actually undefined. That simply means that there is no such file or there is no such content of this file. Okay, so that is why it is always important that you try to check for errors before proceeding to make use of whatever data that you are looking for. Okay, so this is a proper way to handle this kind of errors. We are going to look at other ways to handle errors like using try catch, but this is one way. Okay, so this summarizes the system error here, system errors. So next, let's look at user specific errors. So let me call these user specific errors. So what happens here is that you can create a custom error class and make use of it to throw custom errors. Okay, so we are going to try to do that. For now, let me comment this out. So here, we are going to create a class. I'm going to call this class invalid input error. And then this my custom class is going to extend Node.js error. Okay, so this error here comes from Node.js directly, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so if you don't know what classes and extend means, I want to reference you to watch our JavaScript course. That is where we explore all these different JavaScript concepts. So for now, I will progress. We need to have a constructor because we are extending the error class, and to do this properly, you need to extend this constructor here. Also, watch our JavaScript course or any JavaScript course before you start doing Node.js. That is where all these has been already explained. All right, so the constructor takes in a message, and the message is being passed to, of course, super. Using super basically passes whatever you pass as an argument here to the parent class. Okay, so we pass that message. Next, we also set this the name of, this is optional, but I like to do it this way. So the name is, I will just copy this. Okay, so that is the name of this class that we've created. All right, so now we have created a custom class for our input error. So how can we make use of this to create user-specified errors? Let's take a look. So what we can do is, assuming we have a function somewhere that processes user inputs before storing them in the database, let's assume that we take in the input, and here we check if there is no input at all, maybe if input is empty, and then we throw our error. So we are throwing this error that we have here. Then here we said input not defined. Okay? Input not defined. So we have our process function. Our process function throws this error if input is not defined. But if input is defined, of course, we will just console log the input. Okay? So moving on next, let's look at where we want to make use of this process input method or function. So down here, we want to make use of this to process input before storing it in the database. So we can say const validated input. Okay, so we can return this rather than printing it out. So assuming we have validated it. All right, so we can say validated input equals to process input, and here we don't pass in anything for now. So what we can do is to console log validated input. All right, so let's run this and see what we'll get. Okay, so as you can see, we have thrown an error, and the error that we throw says invalid input error, which is basically the custom error class that we created. And of course, the message says input not defined, which is the custom message that we specified. Okay, so we can do this better. Instead of ending our program like we have here, we can basically cache this error and continue with the rest of our program. So we can do this by using try cache, and then here we just console log what the error would be. So make sure to pass error here. Okay, let me complete that spelling. So we have error, then here we have error 2. So you can also access the message of the error by using dots. I always like to use question mark like this. Okay, so down here we can do other things, and our program is not going to stop. So here we say, let's just stop down here. All right, so let's run this program. Now, what is going to happen is that this stop is going to be executed even while we have this error. Okay, so let's do that. All right, guys, so I had to switch to another playground, but of course we have the same code here where we define our custom class, and then we try to throw the error in case we don't have a valid input. And next we try to catch the error here. So we were saying that the console log here is going to still run while we still have our error here. So our program is not going to end at this error. The reason for that is because we added try catch right here. Okay, so even while we have the error printed, our program still continues to run right here. Okay, so let's do the reverse. Let's comment this out and comment this out and see. So without this try catch, you notice that our program stops right here where the error starts. Okay, so this is how you can create user-defined or user-specified errors, and also this is how you can handle such errors. Now, it is very important that you master how to create these errors, because as you continue to work with your projects, you're going to encounter different errors and you need different ways to handle them. And at the same time, you need to give these errors different names so that you can display them on the front end appropriately. So next, let's look at assertion errors. So like I said, it is mostly used when you are writing tests, but let's try to see how we can mimic that. So I'll clear this out for more room, and I will require assertion here by saying assert equals to require assert. Okay, so I think this is just JavaScript and not Node.js. All right, guys, so let's require assert here. Let's create a function that divides a number by 0, and of course that is going to give us an error. So let's take two numbers, a, b, and let's say assert that b is not equals to 0, and let's pass this. Divisor must not be 0. Okay, and then let's do return a, b like that. Okay, we're just dividing two numbers, but before we do that, we need to make sure that the second number is not 0, because that's going to cause an error. Okay, so let's try out this program. Let's do const result equals to, of course, let's call the function, and let's say 10 divided by 0. If we console log results, this is definitely going to give us an error, so we can say results. Okay, so 10 cannot be divided by 0. That's going to give us this error. So let's try it out. Okay, so we have the error thrown. Here we have assertion error. As you can see, we have assertion error. Divisor must not be 0. So assuming this is 1, we won't have this error, but we'll have the result right here. Okay, so this is how you can throw these different errors. And like I said before, assertion errors are mostly used during testing, or they are used by testing frameworks to check for errors and at the same time check if your test passes or not. Okay? All right, so this ends the demo for some of these errors that we have explored. First, we started with JavaScript errors, which is basically syntax errors and programming mistakes and all of that. And next, we move into system errors, which is you trying to access something in your laptop or in your system that doesn't exist, or making calls to an external APIs and the API doesn't exist, or maybe the API returns different errors. And also we have the next one, which is user specified errors. So at this point, you create custom errors and then you throw it depending on where the program is at. And then lastly, we have assertion errors, which is mostly used during testing. All right, moving on, we are going to look at how to use debugger and how to understand stack trace. So see you in the next video.